Going live now. And we're live! Welcome everybody to Self-Care Sunday! I'm thrilled to be here with y'all. It's great to be back. Shout out to the people in the chat and to all of those of you not watching live later. I know I'm talking to people in the future. This is like the closest to time travel that I'm going to get, folks. Welcome to you. Please do leave comments. Shout yourselves out. Let us know what your favorite part of this was. You're as much a part of this community as everyone who's able to be with us live, which, hello, beautiful people. Bev Spires, welcome to the first time that you're seeing this live. That's super exciting. One sec, it looks like I could improve. Oh, there we go. Just fixing the chat, folks. That's the bottom. Great. It's so good to see you all here. Marina Vermillion, Rosie N, Niam, Neve, I remember that one. Nanny, Anna M, Nizzy, Holloway. So great to have you guys back, have you here. It's always a pleasure to hang out live on Sundays. So we've got an exciting show for you today. One of my good friends, Josh Perault of the Taking Initiative D&D podcast, is going to be on the show just in a moment for Taking Initiative. We're going to talk about D&D and self-care and how it can be an amazing tool for sanity, well-being, and fun. And we're going to get into time management and other stuff. Obviously, if you guys got questions, anything creativity and self-care related is welcome, and for that matter, pretty much anything. But that's what we're going to be talking about. Oh my God, why are you guys up at 2 a.m.? Oh, Marina, I hope you get some sleep. As an occasional night owl, I can relate, but definitely take care of yourself. This will be here. Oh, Tiffy. Tiffy is normally in this seat. That's why we have the Tiffy cam here in the corner. She is, I don't know, she's got health problems. She's sneezing. She's like got a condition called chronic rhinitis, so I think it's on a flare-up. But she's in good spirits. She's still eating well. She still loves to play. She still loves love. Hopefully she will join us in a moment. She's too social a cat to stay away for long. Isn't that right, Tiffany? No, you're really just too cool for me, aren't you? Okay, anyway. A couple housekeeping notes, announcements before we dive into the interview. Number one, drum roll, please. In November of last year, I ran a contest as part of Write a Script in November, otherwise known as Rise Scrivember, and it was the audio drama contest. The audio drama contest was that any script that was an audio drama and under like 30-something pages and under 5 characters or so, one of those scripts that was submitted would be selected by me to be produced by me and whichever of my friends happened to be free and thought it would be fun. So anyway, joke aside, I am actively producing Frameshift, the winning script from that contest. Keep your eyes peeled for the emails. I think I cannot 100% commit to this, but I'm like 95% sure that I can start announcing the cast as of next Sunday, right here on Self-Care Sunday. That was not a promise, but we're getting really close, and I think that promising you that almost will be a fire under my ass to get it done this week. Juliana Barbosa, welcome. Hello, I see you jumping in. Victoria Frey, you're right on time. You can't. If cats can't be late, we can't be late to Self-Care Sunday. And cats are never late. They're always exactly on time. Except when it's time to bring Tiffy to the vet. Then we're always late because she doesn't like her carrier. The next thing is Community Forum. It's a place that we've created online, myself and some of the people in this Self-Care Sunday fam, and it's amazing. It's like one of my favorite places online. I've just been sharing some of the books that I'm reading and sort of the ups and downs any given week, and I've been asking questions there about Focused AF, the new version of the old feed that I was making last year for a podcast that's coming back in April. You can learn more at community.focused.af. That's community.focused.af. Next up, I just want to shout out all my Patreon supporters and patron people for my personal channel, as well as for the greater Wolf 359 world. And again, Wolf 359, we're still running the Patreon to like raise money for the people's amazing work over the last 4 years. We've paid for the show, like the cost of making the show, and now we want to pay our people. So that's happening at the Wolf 359 Patreon, patreon.com/Wolf359radio. And then my personal Patreon, which supports these efforts and other things like Rice-Gryvember and just kind of all my non-Wolf 359 online experiments, and soon to be Focused AF. But anyway, more about that later. Shout out to the people who've joined recently. I saw Danny Autumn signed up today on patreon.com/Zach Valenti. And it was awesome to see you do that. And yeah, I'll see you guys next weekend for the Patreon Town Hall. Yeah, until then, thank you all for being here. Self-Care Sunday, the thing that has kept me sane since the end of Wolf 359. In addition to other things, like, oh my god, diet and exercise. Who knew? Who knew how they would change my mood? Every time. So now it's time to welcome Josh on the stream. He's been waiting patiently in mute, and I would love to bring him in now to talk a little bit about self-care, creativity, and D&D. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, man. How's it going?
So great. I'm so glad you could make it.
Same here, dude. I know we tried to do this once before, but life got in the way, as life tends to do.
Life shakes fist at ceiling.
Life gets in the way of life sometimes, but that's okay. That's what it does.
Hell yeah. Well, why don't you fill in my introduction a little bit and just give the people a sense of, you know, what is it that you're working on? How did you come to be in that? And yeah, feel free to take tangents into what you feel you've learned along the way, but we'll definitely be getting into that for sure.
Sure. Well, again, my name is Josh Perault or Perault or however you want to pronounce it. Doesn't matter. As long as it's just Josh, that's fine. Or you're just talking to me, that's okay. I am professionally an online editor for TV and film post-production. So I'm currently the editor for the show Blue Bloods on CBS and the show Happen Leonard on the Sundance Channel. That is, again, what I do professionally. But on the side or alongside as a secondary job, I am also the DM and co-founder for the Taking Initiative podcast, which is a D&D 5e module-based podcast on the Spark Network, which I'm also a co-founder on, alongside John Buckmaster, also called Bucky, and Drew Tillman, both part of the Taking Initiative podcast. We tend to pull on other shows that we have become friends with and want to see grow, and it's more of a community building network. So we also have the Lucky Die and Nerds on a Roll. Other than that, I have a third job, which I'm also a dad. So I get to experience the joys of bringing up a kid and, you know, showing him the things that I've enjoyed growing up and what he may enjoy in life, and get to do dad things, which, you know, I just hope to do a great job and deal with the failures and deal with the successes all the same. And hopefully everything can turn out A-okay. And hi to everyone in the chat that's saying hi.
That's awesome. And shout out to whoever in the chat just told me that my mic was a little quiet. I love when people fix things with feedback. So let's get into it.
Sure.
I think the first thing that I would love to talk about is you play D&D. I honestly have sat in the wings of many a D&D game, haven't played. The first participating role that I've had was on your show as a non-character player, or a non-player character.
There you go. NPC.
Yeah.
Non-player character.
And it was a great experience. Can you tell me a little bit about just how did you get into D&D? What does D&D mean to you? And like, is it like, yeah, just why don't we start there?
Of course. Well, for those who don't know, also, Zach plays the big bad or the villain for the game we're currently running, or the story we're running. We like to think of it as a audio drama D&D kind of experience. We try to make it a little bit more than just listen to people play the game. So he plays Strahd von Zarovich, which is the Dracula adjacent character for this module. This guy right here, if you're watching on the video, that's Zach. So D&D in itself, I've been playing since junior high. I started with, and for those who don't know, D&D stands for Dungeons and Dragons. I know it's become more accepted of what the actual term means, but there are people who do not know what it is. But Dungeons and Dragons is a tabletop role-playing game where you take on a role, you take on a character. People sit around the table and play, while one person, the dungeon master or the DM, also known as a game master sometimes, which is me in the current podcast. They know the adventure. They run all the characters that aren't the players. They make sure that whatever the players want to do, they can do or not do in a certain way. They are the rule master. They run everything. And the other people at the table get to play in your game. And I joined in as a player in a 3.5 edition D&D game back in 7th or 8th grade, alongside Bucky, who is one of the players in my game. That game lasted a little bit, not too long. I fell off for a while. Right before I started working where I am now, I hopped into a 4th edition game as a player, alongside a couple of my friends from the movie theater that I used to work at. And after I started working in Manhattan, I did not have time to play anymore, so that fell off the table. Fast forward a little bit more, 5th edition came out, and Bucky and I were talking. We wanted to play. We found out that our friend Drew at work, he was really into this kind of thing. And then we found out that Nick at work was interested to play because he's never played before. And those are 2 players that we currently have now on the podcast. We hopped into a 5th edition game that Bucky was running. We were playing in person, then it changed the internet for a while. But because I'm a dad, and because I'm super busy with work, and everyone else is busy with work, and I was all the way up in the Bronx, and everyone else was in Brooklyn and all over the place in New York, getting to meet up and actually play wasn't very feasible anymore. So the way that we got around that was we decided, hey, but it was Bucky's idea, why don't we record the next game that we do? And that way we have a reason, if we turn it into a podcast, we have a reason to meet up or record and play because we have a obligation to do so. It was a nice, nifty way to backdoor our way into getting to spend time with each other and take a break from life. It's fantastic. So I picked up the Curse of Strahd book. I started to DM for the first time in my life, out loud at least. We tried a group messaging thing before then. I won't get into that. But I decided to, bite the bullet and try. I've been watching Critical Role for a while, which is a voice actor D&D thing. I've played quite a bunch. I'm a big nerd. I know what's going on in the game. So why don't I pick up the book? I'll read it up. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, big nerds.
That's what I do. It's the thing. So I just decided to do it, and we started recording. And eventually at the podcast meetup where I met Zach, I talked to Christian Madera from the Once and Future Nerd, who I was editing that for a while.
Can I pause you? Because
Yeah.
I had the same question. Lynn Levenstam in the chat is asking what I was thinking, which is, can you slow down the additions thing?
Oh, yes, sure. So the additions for D&D is when it first came out, there was something like called the Red Box, or there was AD&D, and there was just over time the game progressed and changed. So the main rule set that you would use would grow over time, and the company that would make the game would update it based on feedback from the audience, based on what they saw was working and not working. And over time, you went through the different editions. So you had AD&D, you had 3, you had 3.5, you had 4th, and now we are currently on 5th edition.
Would people ever go back and play a 2nd edition game now?
There are people that do that. There are very different rule sets, so it's like picking up a different game. 5th edition now is like taking a lot of the best parts that were existing in the old stuff, weeding out a lot of the bad stuff, and making it a little bit easier to walk in and be able to play without having to deal with a lot of the math that was going on.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because in the chat, Rosie N wrote
Nerds.
nerds. I say after I was at a robotics competition since Thursday. I love
Yeah,
it. It's so good.
I mean, I'm
Nerds,
covered in
welcome.
comic book tattoos. I code. I've been gaming for a long time. It's who I am, and that is perfectly okay. Because honestly, it just means that you're passionate about something, and what's wrong with that?
I agree. I
Yeah.
think nerds make the world a better place.
Yeah.
Second, I got out of focus.
Okay. So yeah, when I met you, I talked to Christian Madera. Again, I was the editor for the Once and Future Nerd up until very recently, just because taking initiative has taken such a big part of my time and my life that I'm unable to edit that. I asked him if he wanted to host a pilot episode if we had one ready, and him and Zach Glass said yes, and that's where we hosted our pilot. Then after that, we've just been trucking. We got to work with the current creators of D&D, Wizards of the Coast.
No
over the summer.
way. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're actually working with Wizards of the Coast, the company that made D&D the game.
We did over the summer. It was an idea that I pitched to them personally, and Greg Tito from Wizards decided to pick up on the idea, and we got to work with 9 other podcasts for the Podcast of Annihilation, and we were able to basically launch their newest module book for them by showing different adventures that can take place, and also showing up on each other's podcasts to create a community and show that you don't need to just be in your own little group. You can work with each other and play with each other and enjoy just the company of people all around the world. Like we worked with D&D is for Nerds in Australia, and we worked with Will Jones from Encounter Roleplay in England. And
that's amazing.
Over in California, like we got to do a worldwide thing, and it was one of the best things I've ever got to do. And I've been seeing that other people have been starting to, make the ball keep rolling with that, with their own projects. And it's been a joy to see. But
incredible.
That's kind of where we're at now.
So, so as a nerd about self-care, I really would love to know, what do you think of when you think of self-care? How do you define that for yourself? Why is it important to you as a creator, as somebody who is on a schedule to ship podcast episodes regularly? Like, how does self-care matter in your life?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you're not taking care of yourself, the things that you need to do are potentially not going to get done. You can really get into downward spirals of, especially if you're writing or trying to think of like the adventure you're doing, or you need to edit and sit down and do the thing. If you're not motivated to do so, or if you're not enjoying what you're doing or find a way to get through it, you're going to start disappointing yourself. And then you'll start disappointing the people who are supposed to be listening to your thing, and that'll disappoint you. And you just keep on going down. So without that ability to take care of yourself in no matter what way that can potentially be, hopefully a constructive way, you're going to start falling apart with the things. And if you're like, for me, I'm working, I'm a dad, I'm doing the podcast, there's a lot of balls up in the air, and you need to find some way to focus in and either take a break sometimes or find a way to enjoy the thing that you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to burn out really hard. And if you burn out, you can't do the other things that you have to do. And honestly, the most important bit for that for me is if I can't stay focused to be able to take care of my kid, then I'm ultimately not doing well as a dad. And that is the most important job that I have.
I would love to get further into that. I'm just starting to collect questions from the chat, which we'll get to in a moment. Yeah. So yeah, definitely keep them coming in the chat, folks. So I think you've mentioned this sort of juggling act with being a podcaster, being a professional, being a father, being a friend. Like, there's a lot of hats in life, and it seems like you are, like me, somebody that is constantly needing to shift them and change them, and just because there's so damn many, and they're all important. How do you think about sort of time management? How do you, in thinking about time management, make time for self-care as for the reasons you just said?
Well, first and foremost is looking at the things that I have on my plate, and I have to go, what can I not live without? what do I need to do? Those have to come first. And ultimately, as much as the podcast is important to me, it is not my absolute need. It is
Mm-hmm.
this thing I want to do, and it is kind of actually my self-care. It is my way of venting and doing it. But making sure that my kid is provided for, and just to give people a look beyond the curtain right now, there was a point in time I didn't live with him. There's a point in time I did live with him, and now currently I'm in the stage of visitation. Just because of, if a relationship's not working, unfortunately, you have to break it off no matter how hard that is. So now I need to balance visitation with my kid, which those weekends, there's nothing else that can come in the way of those weekends except for me being deathly ill.
Right.
And then also my job, because if I do not go to my job, if I do not make money, I cannot support myself or my child. So those two things are my pillars. That's how I structure my week. That's how I structure my life. And all the time in between now becomes my quote unquote free time, because the podcast is so important to me. And that is a way of me, being creative. It is a way for me to vent out. Editing for me is what I do professionally, and it's what I do for the podcast. So for me, it can be therapeutic. Sometimes it can be tedious, but I try to look at it as making the best episode possible so people can enjoy it. So then the podcast starts to fill in the gaps. And then on top of that, if I start to realize I don't have a lot of time, or I only have a day or two, I try to fill that in with our podcast meetups. I try to fill it in with sitting down, just playing a game for a couple hours. And between Bucky, Drew, and myself for the podcast, we know that if life starts to get you really, really down, or you just need a break, we will just pump the brakes. Someone else will take some of the load off, so that way we can take a day or two to just chill out.
So it sounds like teamwork really makes the dream work in a lot of ways.
Yes, absolutely. Without, like, I found with a podcast, I'm sure you can approve of this as well. The podcast community, including the audience and as well as the creators, is an amazing group of people for support. Like for me, Julia Schaffini from Spirits is one of my closest friends, and also my deadline friend. We keep each other accountable for what we need to do. When we go to the podcast meetups, it's a big vent session for some of us sometimes, of just getting our load off and just having drinks and talking with each other and being able to enjoy each other's company. We've made some really great friends within that group. And without each other, it probably may be harder, because we're all trying to do creative things and experimenting with things and entrepreneurship, which is, I know, your big thing. And without that support network, it's kind of hard to do. So having someone to support, whether it's your parents, whether it's your friends, it's incredibly important to find at least one person to be able to count on, and them to count on you.
And so I guess, like, how do you, because I feel like that can be a catch-22 for a lot of people, where it's like, if I don't feel like I have anybody and I don't feel well, and in order to feel well, it becomes a sort of like negative feedback loop.
Yes.
How do you deal with that? How do you think about that? Like, if you were in that situation, or have you ever been in that situation and gotten advice that had made a difference for you?
For me, I tend to be incredibly stubborn. That's just who I am.
I don't think we can relate with that at all.
Yeah. So, I can get advice sometimes and I just completely disagree with it. And as a child or as a kid, I'm still my parents' kids, you'll hear advice from your parents all the time. You're like, whatever, mom or dad, you're the parent. But, even your parents have gone through stuff too. So being able to listen to them is important and get the advice. But if you get into that downward spiral of, you're just either too depressed to really want to talk to somebody, or too depressed to do anything, or you want to be able to talk to someone and you can't, then the focus point has to be on you at that point in time, because you cannot be there for someone else or really talk to anyone else until you are able to sink in and do what you have to do. So for me, I know a lot of hobbies for me would include, or in the past would be, to pick up my cello or pick up my bass, just play, to just sit down in a video game for a while and just zone out, to be able to sit in front of a movie or a TV show that I know I enjoy, something that will kick you back into yourself before you can go and talk to somebody else would be important. Because I know some people, like, I'm incredibly empathetic, so I feel whatever feelings tend to go on around me. So if someone else is really depressed and you're depressed and you go to help them, it's not going to make anything worse. Right. You need to be in a better place first. So as I said before, with like your job and your kid, like that's the important bit. Yourself has to be the important part first before you're able to branch
Right.
off.
As my mother says, sine qua non. Without this, nothing. Sort of, and like on the airplane, put the mask on yourself first. I see somebody, Rosie N, has to leave and had a question. Rosie N and Juliana Barbosa, who wondered about like advice for chap lifts, and you have to apply chapstick every 10 minutes. Get better chapstick. I use Aquaphor. That works for me. It's like somewhere between chapstick and Vaseline. Lynn Levenstam says Loco Base. I don't know what that is, but that's what they said. Good luck. Bye.
Good luck.
See you next week, maybe. Question for Josh from Tree Kid. Was there anything else before we switch gears that you wanted to say about the last question?
I don't think so. It's just, I mean, the short version is just before you can help somebody else or before you can get really involved with someone else, make sure you take care of yourself first. And as much as it can be really hard to, and I know some people, it's incredibly difficult to even get out of bed sometimes just from depression. I deal with like social anxiety. So getting to go to events, even the podcast meetups with friends can be really hard for me.
Mm.
But
And
yeah, go ahead.
And you were saying that D&D is actually helpful for that.
Oh, absolutely. Especially as a DM with all the different voices that I have to do, and be like having to sit there and I force myself to be in that situation. It causes me to have to push past it. It's the idea of facing your fears. So, like for the social gatherings,
Would you even say taking initiative?
yeah, yeah. Well, actually, that's one of the reasons that we picked the names. Is initiative is a D&D pun because you roll initiative before a fight.
Uh-huh.
But taking initiative is something that we've all believed in. Of if you want to do something new, if you want to go and just go out and do something or try something, do it. Because if you don't, then it's never going to get done, and you'll just sit there and think, "What if?" And the what ifs can be worse than actually going to do the thing and it failing, because you'll never know. So if you want to do something, if you want to try something as hard as it can possibly be, try and force yourself to go and do it. And if you can't, and you have a friend that can help push you, because I know I have some really pushy friends, or like Julia, we're deadline friends,
Yeah.
as in keep each other accountable. If one of us is feeling like iffy and going to a thing, the other one of us is get your ass there, and we push each other to do that. Having a friend like that is incredibly helpful. So if you can find one, get one.
Awesome. I wanted to get a little bit more in the weeds of time management before we do another audience question. I see somebody asking Butt Munch in the chat.
Good name.
Lol. Welcome late. The name of the podcast is Taking Initiative. On Twitter, it's TI_pod. And all the links will be below. And you can go to thespark.network/taking initiative. You'll find that all there. So yeah, time management. I'm somebody who deals with time management pretty badly, and has learned to like get decent at it over the years. I found that over scheduling myself, like trying to be like really rigorous with like wake up at like 7:30, so like 6 a.m. and like have breakfast by 7:30 and be showered like 15 minutes in between, like having every minute scheduled never really worked for me because I'd fall off of it one day. Even if I kept it up for like 2 weeks, which I would never get more than like 5 days through that. The second it fell off, I'd start feeling bad about myself and about like just the whole project, and it would fall apart. Whereas picking theme days, like just blocking out all of this day will be taxes and nothing else will like necessarily happen that day. And not like taxes will be done, but like I am just going to only focus on this. And I know that if I do that for 4 days in 2 weeks, it'll get done. even if all of it gets done in the first 2 of those sessions, bringing it to a head for me works. Like, do you have any strategies that you've found have worked for you?
We are incredibly similar in that way. I try not to do things by a time base. This is even at work. Like, I have deadlines all the time. The only time slots that I have are when I go to work, when I'm out of work, when something is due, and also when my client sessions are, because those are rigorous and those are in place. Everything else, I tend to be a little bit more lenient on when something is going to happen. I just know it needs to happen in a block of time or when something is due. I trying to handle it in a way that I tend to code, which is you look at things from a macro point of view, and then you look at things from a micro point of view. You want to make sure you're not nitpicking every single second first, because then it'll feel very overwhelming. And if you slip on one thing, you'll start to see that everything else slips over time.
That's exactly what would happen to me.
Yeah, that's same here. I tried that once before too, and it just did not work. But I knew that, okay, my podcast episode is due Thursday. We need to be able to QC it potentially on Wednesday. So as long as I edit it Monday or Tuesday, that has to be it. So then I pick one of those days. I don't pick a specific time, because what happens if I get home late? What happens if the MTA messes up? That never happens. What's going to happen? So if I get home and it's late, then I go, okay, it'll just have to happen Tuesday. And I'm a little bit more fluid with things that are being scheduled instead of tending to be rigorous.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that have to be in place are the things that must happen by a very particular time. And then as you go, you just need to accept the fact that things change, that plans don't necessarily happen. As a DM and as a player in D&D, you will notice that plans never happen. And if they do, you're very lucky. So treat life the same way, as you need to kind of flow with it sometimes, and do not get stuck with the fact that a plan doesn't happen. When I was a kid, that used to bum me out. If I made a plan, and especially like 3 weeks in advance, and the plan day happened, and what if the other person was sick and then it stopped? I would be shut down for the entire day. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I was terrible with change. And then as I grew up and as I matured a bit and realized that life just doesn't work in the way that you want it to all the time, you need to be able to go with the flow a bit more. So again, to wrap that up a little bit, have your deadlines when you need things due, but try not to be as rigorous as possible, and accept the fact that things can change.
I love that. I think my spin on that, the like careful about making yourself wrong or beating yourself up. I'm really good at doing that to me, so I feel like I have earned the right to give myself more of that advice, and I am unqualified to give advice. I'm not, so like, just take everything that I say with a grain of sand, and just like, I need to remember, and that's one of the reasons why I'm still doing this Self-Care Sunday thing, is just the same reason I got a tattoo, the same reason that I have been reading more books instead of like staring at YouTube, is because I need to remember to take care of myself, and that starts with not being so mean to myself.
Absolutely.
Because the things that I'll say to myself in my head are things that if anybody else said them to me, I wouldn't hang out with those people. So it's like, why is that okay? And I think that time management is a manageable problem that becomes impossibly overwhelming when it's on like underneath a mountain of shame.
Yes. Yeah. You can dig yourself real deep with shame.
So on that note, on this mountain of shame, one of the last questions that I see from the chat, I think this is Neve M, spelled Niam M, but I believe that it's to be pronounced Neve if I remember my DMs. Anyway, question for Josh: any advice for baby DMs? I am trying to plan a few games for a group of friends, but we all have very little experience with RPGs apart from listening to podcasts, and D&D is a good is D&D a good system to start with, or are there any other ones that are a good place to start? The Fate system looks cool.
Me personally, a lot of my time has been spent in the D&D system. I've had experience with a few others, like one of our Patreon episodes was dealing with the Masks system, which is a bunch of teenage superheroes. It's like Young Justice, and it runs off the Powered by the Apocalypse system. Fate, I have not used myself, although I've listened to the Adventure Zone do that. Adventure Zone is a podcast featuring the McElroy brothers from the Bim Bam podcast, or my brother and me. But the advice that I can say for baby DMs, which included me, which I decided to make my first DM experience an audience-based thing. Why not? Go big or go home, I guess. You don't need to do that. But if you want to, you can go one of two ways. You can go the homebrew aspect or your own individual adventure, which some people feel way more comfortable with instead of all the reading that you have to do. Or you can go with the module way, which is what I did. You can pick up a book, which Wizards of the Coast makes, or you can pick up these little micro adventures online that people make. Sit down and read all the source material. It gives you a good idea of how the adventure is created. It gives you a good way to see how things can be paced, P-A-C-E-D, paced. And then if you go onto like Reddit or go, Google searching of how people ran those different adventures, or watch like Dice Camera Action, which is the Wizards of the Coast YouTube or podcast game, where they go through these modules. You get to see how other DMs run, and you can go, that seems like a cool idea. I want to try that, or that is not something how I would run a game. Let's try it different. One of the main quotes I remember from Critical Role is "Your fun is wrong," which is one of the things that it's not true. The way you run a game, you could be all about the combat. You can be all about the story. You can do voices at the table, not voices at the table. But what the most important thing is your players and you are on the same page of what your game wants to feel like. For me, Bucky has been one of my best friends for half my life. Drew and Nick I've worked with for a long while. And all the other new players that come in, or the guests or whatever, they adapt to the style that we have created. So that's the overarching thing. As a DM, find out what you want to run, whether it be a module, whether it be homebrew, and look at it, as I was saying before, from the programming aspect, from a macro point of view, and from a micro point of view. Don't think you have to know every single detail about the book. The book is just a guideline. If you want to change things about it, go ahead and change it. If you don't like how something is structured, or you don't understand something, change it. Just remember, as we were just saying before, with not beating yourself up, I fudge things all the time. It's what you do. Or you forget that you said something, so you change it. Or you get a rule wrong. It's okay. Accept the fact that your players are going to mess up. You're going to mess up. You're going to do things that are awesome. They're going to do things that are awesome. As long as you understand that you guys are having fun and that you guys are all on the same wavelength of where you want the adventure to go, that is the most important bit. Because if you're not having fun, you forgot the fact that D&D or whatever system you play is a game. You're there to have fun. You're there to experience this other story that someone else can play for you, or that you play for them. And that, the cooperation and communication at the table is really where the game lies. So just make sure you try not to take on too much. You plan a little bit at a time, and it is a-okay for a plan that you have to not happen. Be fluid with it, change with it. And if you do that, you'll be okay.
I love it. I wanted to, before we wind down, ask you about what's it like to be a dad. One of my best friends on the planet is my father. I got to see him a little earlier today. Just like a sort of drive-by hello, but I am someone who thinks that it's just a lot of fun to get to know sort of that person in my life. So I'm curious, sort of, what is it like to, like, I imagine, like, having a kid, and I'm curious, what is your experience being a dad? How does it sort of relate to your creative life?
Mm-hmm.
Does it feel like, your kid's in the way of being an artist or being a creator, or does it fuel that for you? Like, I'm just curious your experience.
Well, being a dad, I've gone through a couple of different stages of this. And as I was saying before, he didn't live with me for the first year and a half. I was doing like an every other weekend visit because my girlfriend at the time and myself lived in two different locations. So I got to experience the beginning a little differently than most, it was good and bad. It was good because I really got to treasure the times I was with him, and it was bad because I missed the hell out of him when I wasn't seeing him.
Mm.
And then for a while, I was living with him. He was in the apartment with me, and I got to experience him when he was like 1.5 to almost about 4, which is what he is now. And now I'm dealing with the every other weekend thing as him as a 4-year-old. Throughout the whole process, it's been fantastic. He's a great kid, which is incredibly helpful, and very smart and interested in whatever we're doing. So, like, we'll sit down and play video games together. Like, he loves Little Big Planet. We'll sit down with a D&D map, and he'll pretend that traps make cookies come out. You know, he is a bundle of creativity. Every kid tends to be, because they don't really know the rules of the universe yet. So they make the rules for themselves, which is a great lesson to learn, especially from a DM or anyone who's a creator, that when you're writing something or you're creating something, as long as it's not restricted to the physics of this universe, you can make it happen. Sometimes you need to work out a little bit of logic of how, but you're able to see the world differently once you realize that you can take away the fact that, you know, oh, we just know how the world works. But if you remove that and try to look at it from a different point of view, you can get a different look on things. I've found that to be incredibly helpful as a creator. But watching someone else grow that is incredibly close to you, and something that I didn't know I could feel, or attachment I could feel until it happened. I know that's a very cliche thing to hear, of you just don't know yet because you're not a dad, or you don't know because you're
Right.
not a mom. I realized that once he was born. I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
Right. There's sometimes a reason why cliches are cliche.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's a fantastic experience. And one of the troublesome bits now is, you know, sometimes when a relationship doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you have to deal with the consequences of such. But I now get to really treasure the time that I get with my kid. And I try to find as much time as I can to call him and just talk to him. He told me the other day that he's an artist because he draws now. And he sent me a picture
That's awesome.
he was like, I drew you. So he sent me a picture of me, and he drew my mom. And he was like, I sent Nanny a picture, and I drew her. So you're getting to see your kid be creative. And as much as we're adults, like I just turned 30 not that long ago, and I have a career, and, you know, I'm doing adult things and taxes and all this stuff.
Oh, taxes.
You have a constant reminder, because they will remind you that they are there all the time, that you can be a kid sometimes, and getting to spend time with your kid and pretending and doing voices, like, especially as a DM, I get to do voices all the time. I get to do it with him. So I get to practice all my voices with my kid, and he starts to do them back. So it's a constant reminder that being creative and being a kid is okay sometimes. Not all the time. Sometimes you have to be an adult, but a lot of the times it is okay to dip into just a fun space. And I mean, it can be stressful at times. You know, your kid can really get on your nerves. That happens. They're kids, but that's okay. And it's balanced with the fact that they can be a lot of fun and a huge joy to be with.
That's awesome. Well, it's awesome to see the world through your eyes, and just great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I've already seen a bunch of shout outs. Somebody thinks they know what they're doing with D&D now.
Hey, good. Yay.
Neve appreciates the advice. Very excited to try my own campaign. Somebody asked what class I like to play as, and I actually don't know what classes there are. We're not going to get into that now, but definitely on Twitter, if you have like a class for me, tell me. Or in the comment when this video is up, and not a live chat, because the chat gets lost. It stays in the video, but I don't think all the chat comments are in the video anymore, because they changed how they... Anyway, point is, tweet at me, at Zach Valenti, or hit me up in the perma video comments. The last thing that I saw from the chat that I'll shout out, Jaya B, had some thoughts on our conversation around time management, and talked about sort of giving themselves options every day. Right now they have note writing and paper writing, and they can do one or the other every day of the weekend. And the idea is that change helps focus for Jaya B, and I can definitely relate to that.
That's good advice.
And my thing is, what's good advice about what's good about that advice is that it models a thinking. I don't think the specifics of any piece of advice that we could give here would be as useful as the thinking that produced that for the person for whom the strategy was useful. If that makes sense. Like, point is, like, I think the best advice I could give you is, like, learn to listen and think in ways that are beneficial for you. And, like, that's listening to your own body, that's listening to other people's advice. And that's, like, I definitely have caught myself in a bad cycle of, like, imitating somebody else, like, gaining self-confidence and, like, you know, feeling good until I, like, break the, like, diet, whatever it might be. And then I feel shitty about myself and, like, let things slide and, like, kind of go back into a bad pattern until I, like, shake it off and, like, pick a new person to imitate. And it's been useful in that, like, I feel like I have a treasure trove of different strategies that could work for staying sane and sort of balanced, but none of them are, like, for me. There are parts of this one and that one that I can borrow and sort of, like, make something that works for me for now. But I think looking at life like there's an answer that we're going to find that's going to change everything forever is, I think, unrealistic. And it's more about learning to dance. And there are a lot of different ways to dance. So I guess that's what I love about that comment. So thank you, Jaya B.
I completely agree with that. And just very quickly to go off of that, a lot of people look at a lot of the podcasts and YouTube and, like, Critical Role as the main example. And Matt Mercer, who's the DM for that, is a very prominent voice actor. He has said something, and it's something I want to hone in very hard, is as much as you see someone doing the thing you want to do, it does not mean that their style is something that will fit you. Find your own. And if you look at someone else and you like something they're doing, do not think, I need to be like them. Think, how can the way they do it help the way that I do it?
That's exactly right. I burnt the fuck out trying to copy Casey Neistat because I'm not Casey Neistat, and that's okay. The world doesn't need another Casey Neistat. We already have one, and he's tremendous. And I'm like, that's a great thing to remember. I remember that maybe 2 days out of the week. So, hooray! That's what we're all here for. That's the power of community, is reminding each other. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I'll be back next week. I don't have a time announced. That's my calendar. Follow me on Twitter for the, like, time updates. Also join the community for the benefits of being in the community, community.focused.af. I also, the time of these streams get announced there. But long story short, I love you. This is always fun. I so look forward to next week, and have a wonderful week. And thank you, Josh, for coming on. Follow him, TI_pod on Twitter, Taking Initiative, thespark.network/taking initiative. Listen, enjoy, hear my evil. Well,
also, if you want to follow me personally, it is at Xyroxis the Beard. That's at XIROXIS the Beard. You can see me posting all the time at the Taking Initiative one too. But if you want to follow me personally, that is where you can find me.
Do it. Just do it.
Do it.
And last but not least, another shout out to the amazing patrons that support this channel and all of my internet creations that are not Wolf 359. And shout out to all the Wolf 359 patrons and just everybody who's listened to and supported that show, because I wouldn't be who I am without that show, at least who I am right now. And it's incredibly fun and meaningful and awesome. Check it out. wolf359.fm. I think that is enough plugs for all the things, and just so grateful for all this time. All right, now is the part of the stream where I find the button to stop the stream. It's funny because it takes too long.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Eventually.
Bye. See you later.
Yeah, right. Play me off.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the button.